Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Sports Insider. I'm Dan Labbe. Chris Fedor is currently on a bus to Chicago. So Bud Shaw sitting in our chair here.
Good times for Chris.
Yeah.
Good times.
He was stuck at the airport in Milwaukee. Had to take a bus to Chicago to get a flight back to Cleveland from the Cavs game last night. Our show today, we're going to talk to Joe Vardon. We're going to talk Cavaliers and their Central Division Championship, the number 2 seed with Joe Vardon. Then we're going to talk Browns with Tom Reed and some Indians with Paul Hoynes. As promised, though, let's bring in one of our Cavaliers team members and our LeBron James reporter, Joe Vardon. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing well, and before we begin, as much as enticing as it would be to laugh at Fedor over this, I've learned never to make fun of another person's travel troubles because it could easily happen to you, or in this case, me. So I hope he gets home okay.
Yeah, do not tempt the travel gods. Bud and I had some adventures at LaGuardia after a Browns game.
Yes, we did. We can appreciate
last year.
Hey, Joe, if a NBA championship parade is held down Euclid, where is the division parade held?
Absolutely. Maybe I'm actually not sure the name of the road that LeBron lives on, but maybe I'm sure his neighbors would appreciate a nice little parade down that avenue. Try it that way.
Joe, obviously a lot has been made. David Blatt made a big deal out of getting the 2 seed. LeBron James, kind of wrote it off. All that said and done, the Cavs are there. They're the 2 seed right now. In the long run, how important is that going to be for them?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 seed is really important. The Central Division Championship is great for sort of aesthetics and kind of, symbolism, but the 2 seed really matters because all the way until the finals, they have home court in the first 2 rounds, and then if anyone beats Atlanta before the Eastern Conference Finals, then the Cavs would retain home court all the way through, and that's really what matters. I mean, I don't know, what have they won? 18 in a row at home, 19, or it's one of the two. They're really, really good at home, and they're good on the road as well. Because they're a really good team, but it does matter, and locking up the 2nd seed is what they wanted to get accomplished since they couldn't get that top spot, and so kudos to them. Well done.
Joe, what do you make of LeBron's stance on that it's not that important?
I've thought about this a little bit, and I had thought it was kind of another case of LeBron sort of chafing at David's lack of NBA experience because David had really kind of put the team out there. At the time, LeBron was talking openly about getting some rest because the Cavs were already in a pretty good spot. An injury here or there, they knew the schedule was kind of tough still. Anything could happen there. And LeBron knows that just getting into the playoffs with him and with the roster that they had was what matters, and getting there healthy. But that being said, LeBron his actions did not match his rhetoric. He had some opportunities to sit. Some tangible things that you would say, okay, it makes sense not to play LeBron that night. He was banged up. He was sick one time. And instead, he went out and really played. And not only has he really played, but he started to go into the post more, kind of hardening his game for the playoffs. And so he has kind of played as though he wanted to back up his coach. And though he's still downplaying the 2nd seed stuff, I think that kind of, subliminally speaks well for the relationship between David and LeBron going forward, that LeBron kind of didn't let his coach fall flat on this one.
Joe, you start to project matchups in that first round. Boston right now is sitting at number 7. They're not playing poorly. They're 13-9 in March and April. Indiana has Paul George back. Their game back to that number 7 seed. Is there a particular team, of course Brooklyn is number 8 right now as well, we should mention them. Is there a particular team that, you look at and say this team of those 3 could give the Cavs trouble in the first round? Maybe not beat them, but give them a long series?
Yeah, I mean, Dan, I've been talking about this for weeks, and I insist that no team will give the Cavs enough problems to be concerned in the first round. Of course they will win the first round. I also know that actually if they had to pick, that they would prefer not to play Indiana. And that's just because, they know they're going to get through that series, but it's going to be a really physical series. It would be maybe a harder test than they would prefer. And so, I think they like the idea of Boston in the first round. Brooklyn would be fine, although admittedly they are playing really well lately. There's no question about that. And, the Heat, with however many games are left, there's 4 or 5 left, depending on who you are, they seem to be almost out of gas for getting that 7th seed. It's not out of the realm of possibility yet. They would prefer not to do that, I think, for the emotional reasons. But the way it's set up right now, I think they'd like it.
Joe, I find it interesting in this town, you may have heard it's been 50 years since they've won a title here, that people can so easily dismiss a number 1 seed. And by that, I'm talking about the Atlanta Hawks. What do you think the state of the union is on that team right now?
Boy, between the Millsap injury and the stabbing/arrest incident, and then you look at their record over the last couple weeks, it's just okay. It's not great. I think that they are in that area where you didn't want to be, and where David Blatt has said over and over again that he doesn't want to be, which is where you're kind of having to push a total reset button. And that doesn't mean they won't be able to. I really like how they play. I like how they have a mix of being able to shoot the ball and also play inside when they need to. But I think the reason why everybody is just kind of lukewarm on the Hawks is just that the season was not going how it was supposed to. The Cavs were never supposed to be 19-20. And kind of while that was all going on is when the Hawks just surprised everyone and shot out so far into the lead in the East. And since, of course, the Cavs totally changed themselves both inside and out, and now they are the team that everyone thought they would be, and they have the best player, and he's playing kind of like everyone thought he would play. And so now we're back to where we were, in October, which is this whole thing is going to run through Cleveland in the East. And so I think that's it. The Hawks certainly have a chance, are a legitimate threat to the Cavs. Of course they are. But when you give them the eye test, right now the Cavs pass more than the Hawks do.
Joe, we know where the Cavs are going to be on the bracket at number 2. That means they'll play probably the number 3 seed in the second round, so you're looking still at either Toronto or Chicago. Which of those teams do you think is more advantageous to the Cavs to get the 3 seed?
Oh, the Raptors. I really believe that. It's funny because I preach and some guys in the league preach all the time about how the playoffs are so much different than the regular season. You have to throw everything out. And I believe that, but I also am taking some things from the regular season, and I know that the Cavs are 3 out of 4 against the Bulls, and it's the same against the Raptors, but I don't, for Toronto's purposes, I don't like their matchup with the Cavs at all. And I think that Chicago is very well coached. They're tough. The Cavs certainly are tougher than they ever used to be, but that will be tested again in a pressure cooker of a playoff series with the likes of Chicago. And I just think, if Derrick Rose is even close to right, that's a tough matchup. I picked the Cavs to go to the finals beginning of the year, so obviously that's who I thought would win that series, but it's a grind. And so, yeah, any chance, the Cavs' road gets easier if Toronto ends up in front of them.
All right, that is Joe Vardon, part of our Cavaliers team and our LeBron James reporter. Joe, thanks for the time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Joe.
It's going to be interesting in the East because, like Joe said, there really isn't a team that you look at and say can beat the Cavs in the first round. And Terry Pluto actually pointed out to me earlier this week in our podcast, LeBron James has never lost in the first round of the playoffs, which is actually, you may think it's not impressive, but you think about guys like Kobe Bryant. There's been years when he didn't even make the playoffs. Michael Jordan early in his career lost in the first round. obviously different leagues,
Well,
different conferences.
LeBron early in his career didn't get to the playoffs.
His first 2 years didn't
first
even
2
make the
years.
playoffs.
But yeah, I think it's a good point. I thought his answer to the Atlanta question was spot on, and I do believe that people have looked since the deal was made with the Knicks, and they've just clearly been able to identify the Cavs as the best team in the league, and that's why Atlanta doesn't worry people as much as you might think.
Although the Spurs starting to make that run that the Spurs make every year after that rodeo
my
trip.
preseason pick was Cleveland, San Antonio. So we'll see whether that holds.
Okay, let's go ahead and switch gears and talk Browns and bring in part of our Browns team, Tom Reed. Tom, how are you?
Good, and yourself?
I'm doing well, Tom. Your mock draft, it's out today. You've got the Browns taking Danny Shelton and Jalen Strong. Nothing new from last week. How confident do you feel on April 30th that that's how it's going to play out?
Not very, because I still think the Browns are going to try to make some kind of move for a quarterback. As you guys know, the one fatal flaw in mock drafts is you can't really. Well, I've seen some people try to make trades in them, but they're kind of confusing. I still think the Browns will exhaust every effort to try to improve their quarterback position, but if they can't, I can definitely see those two positions being positions of need for them and things that they would try to approach. And if those guys were there, I think that they would go after them.
Tom, two things. You mean there's only one fatal flaw in mock drafts?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The other thing is we've heard rumors. I don't even want to call them reports because they seem so outlandish that I can't even say that there's much validity. But the idea of Johnny Manziel being involved in trade talks with Philadelphia, does that in any way make any sense to you?
No, not really. I guess you never say never, but it is that time of year, right? It's that time of year where there's so much stuff floating out there that kind of hard to understand it. But I think, well, to me, if there were any kind of trade for Johnny, it would kind of come after the draft. So, for instance, the Browns, let's just say hypothetically, do somehow find a way to get to Marcus Mariota, or they do get another quarterback in there, then now you could maybe see an idea of maybe, okay, Johnny's not going to play here. He's not going to be in the equation, especially if we draft a young quarterback, one that can play right away. Then maybe you could see them be moving him.
Tom,
but
going
certainly
back
not before the draft.
All right, sorry, Tom, we lost you there for a second. Going back to Johnny Manziel, when it comes time for him to report, when it comes time for him, he's out of rehab and the team gets back together, they go through OTAs, mini camps, things like that. What are the Browns going to be looking for from him on the field and off the field?
Well, I think off the field will kind of, players should know pretty. I got a sense that the locker room had a pretty good read on this guy throughout the year last year, and certainly weren't afraid of expressing some of their disappointment with him at the end of the last year. So I think they'll be looking for kind of the same things off the field. On the field, where it's going to be much more interesting to see kind of where he is and is he adapted his game a little bit more to the pro game. And one of the things that I think is interesting is what has he been doing all this time in rehab? Has he been doing any football-related things? I don't know. I mean, it seems kind of unlikely, but, other than just working out like a normal person would work out, does he have someone in there he's throwing with? I don't mean to make light of the situation, but it's interesting to see where he is as a quarterback right now. And I think it's, again, why one of the reasons that the Browns can't count on him anytime soon.
Tom, getting back to your much talked about mock draft, do you see Shelton as a guy who can play all three downs, or is he a guy that will be on the field for 2 downs and off the field in obvious passing downs?
I could see it going probably certainly early on, being a 2-down guy. The one thing you like about Mike Pettine's defense is he finds creative ways to get guys involved. We saw Bud last year how many defensive backs they had on the field at some time. I felt like sometimes they had 8 defensive backs on the field. I would think that early on they would use him kind of as a 2-down guy and to then kind of bring him up to speed and try to make him a 3-down guy. They would have, I would think, a pretty decent rotation, assuming Phil Taylor was still there. So Phil's got to have to play somewhere. So you're going to have a rotation of guys if you do bring Sheldon, and you're going to have a rotation any which way. The one thing people like about Sheldon is he's very quick. He makes a lot of, for a guy that size, he will make a lot of plays outside the hash mark. So he's not just this guy that is just a massive humanity that can't move.
Tom, looking at another mock draft that came out today, Mel Kiper, he has the Browns going a completely different direction, Devontae Parker and Todd Gurley. I bring that up because you're not seeing a lot of that. You're not seeing a lot of people projecting the Browns to go a route like that. Do you think that's a possibility, that they could go all offense and basically go wide receiver and running back in the first round?
I saw that one too, and it caught me a little bit by surprise. I don't think Devontae Parker is a surprise at all. You know, if Devontae Parker is there, I think they've got to take a long look at that. But when they did bring in, if you talk about to me, their several biggest needs is a run stopper and then a wide receiver. When they brought Randy Starks in, to me that took the need to get a guy like Malcolm Brown out of the equation, so to speak. So then that frees that other position up. Gurley would be. It would be very interesting. I mean, he's coming off. It was Todd Gurley, right?
Yes.
It would be interesting in the sense that you have the running game is decent enough that they could bring those guys back. And if Gurley's not quite ready, he could kind of spend his first 4 or 5 weeks kind of getting ready. We saw the same thing 2 years ago with the Steelers. Bell, Denver Bell was kind of nicked up when he first got there, and he didn't really get going until the second half of the season. So it would be interesting, but that would still to me be a little surprising if they wanted to running back there.
Do you think that pick would say more about Gurley and his potential, or more about what they saw out of Terrence West and the Crow last year?
Oh yeah, I would think it would be more the latter. That they would they want to get better. Down Swagger. They want to get better at the running position, and they don't feel like they were there. Because don't forget, this all started with them going to get Ben Tate.
Sure.
And, of course, that didn't work out. So they certainly want to run the ball. But, again, it would be a very interesting pick, but I just don't see them devoting that high of a draft pick, especially when we've seen so many good running backs in the last couple of years coming out of the mid to later rounds.
All right, Tom, if the draft is Browns fans' Super Bowl, then the uniform unveiling coming up next week, I guess, is the conference championship game. The Browns are making an enormous deal out of this, of course, and there's leaks everywhere and whatnot. I just wonder what your thoughts are about the Browns' approach to unveiling these new uniforms. Are they going over the top, or are they kind of doing what you would expect them to do?
I guess kind of what they expect to do. You know, if they had just come off an AFC championship playoff run, I don't think it would be such a big deal. I mean, they've got to tout something right now. They've had kind of a really difficult off season, which has been well chronicled off the field. And teams that don't win, I think usually make a big deal out of uniform changes. So that's kind of where they are right now. I think someone mentioned the other day, did the Indians slightly change the tone of their blue?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't remember any grand proclamations about that, although I don't follow baseball obviously as closely. But yeah, I mean it's kind of what they're trying to do right now, and in some ways it takes the focus off some of the other stuff, which has been just so bad.
All right, Tom Reed, part of our Browns beat reporter team. Tom, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Of course, you can see his mock draft at cleveland.com/Browns, but it's almost uniform time. And he's right. You know, this is what bad teams do. They don't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
They're a mess. They're coming off a phony 7-win season, really, if you look at that schedule.
I almost think I don't know this for a fact. I'm just speaking out of school here. I almost think the Indians purposely didn't make a big deal out of it after seeing what the Browns did, because I think the Indians want to be that team that is judged by what they do on the field, because they know that's the way they're going to be judged anyway, you know. So they didn't want to get involved in that kind of thing, because obviously it backfired that day, I think, when they announced the logo. I'm not saying it was all their fault that they trumped it up, you know, we took it as media and fans did too, and ran with it also. So.
Yeah, and you know, even the Indians, they usually do send out a press release or something when you see something different like that. And yesterday, there was all this talk on Twitter about, hey,
well, we can get to the bottom of this now with
really
Paul
dark.
Hoynes, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll have him on momentarily, talking Indians who are off to a 1-1 start.
Yeah.
The offense scuffling, but the two guys they just gave big contracts to, performing the way they're supposed to perform, Corey Kluber and Carlos Carrasco.
Yeah, the Carrasco story was pretty interesting, I thought, with the whole heart irregularity and all that. I know his agent suggested that he not sign that contract, but here's a guy who I think just had his fourth child and has had this thing, and I think he likes the fact that this organization has stuck with him. So all these times we beat on these guys to, you know, show loyalty, even though that's really a misused term in this business.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's two instances here where guys have looked at the organization and the city and the fans and everything else. Well, maybe not the fans, because they're not there every night.
Yeah.
And found reason to sign here. And I think it's a positive thing, obviously, for this organization.
All right, let's go ahead and go to Houston now and bring in our Indians beat reporter, Paul Hoynes. Hoynesy, how are you?
Good, guys. How you doing?
We're doing well. And we were just talking about the performances of Carlos Carrasco and Corey Kluber in their first two games. You know, Hoynesy, sometimes a guy signs a big contract, presses a little bit in that first start or that first appearance, and doesn't perform the way he usually is able to. Not the case with these two guys.
No, they both pitched, you know, well enough to win. It was a shame Kluber couldn't get the win, but you got to score a run to win. So, and then it was just a reverse last night. But you know, I think you know, we saw the same kind of thing at the end of the season last year when the Indians were here. Kluber came on, and I think he struck out, you know, double digits, and then Carrasco followed him the next day and struck out, I think, 12 guys, career high 12 guys. So that's a pretty good 1-2 punch right there.
Paul, did you have trouble recognizing this team in those new uniforms?
I was wondering why they didn't have a big press conference, you know? A lighter shade of orange or something like that.
Hey, Paul, we haven't seen Bauer, we haven't seen House yet, we haven't seen McAllister. If you had to pick one of those three guys that you think is, well, we will be talking about as the true number 3 starter at the end of the year, which one do you think it'll be?
You know, I would think it's going to be Bauer. I think he's primed to have a pretty good year. You know, everything, the work he did during the spring was, you know, a little unconventional, but that's Bauer. You know, he worked on throwing strikes to an extreme where he gave up 3 home runs in succession in one inning and then 4 triples in one inning. But I think he made some progress. He did what he wanted to do, and I think this guy is. I think this guy's going to have a good year. I think he'll be you know, in the conversation for having a very good season and a solid number 3 guy.
When you look at Bauer, Hoynesy, what's the key? Is it just kind of avoiding that big inning that seemed to get him last year, where he'd have, you know, a 5-inning start? 4 of those innings would be really good. That middle inning, though, would maybe, you know, he'd give up 3 or 4 runs.
Yeah, I think, you know, he kind of, you know, the first inning did give him problems last year, and we saw that a little bit in spring training. But I think that's key, and throwing strikes is a key. I think he's much better, like any pitchers, when he's working ahead.
What are your expectations for T.J. House? I don't think spring training necessarily ended for him as well as it was going in the early part of this spring.
Yeah, you know, he pitched well, but he had a couple bad innings. You know, like Bauer last year, the big inning kind of came up and bit TJ during camp. But you know, I think the key for him obviously is you know, he's got to throw strikes. He's got that funky delivery, and you know, he's got a lot of moxie, and he's left-handed, and I think that's gonna serve him well. The thing with him, and this is what Francona has said a lot in spring training, is that the second time he faced teams last year, he was better. So, you know, that's a pretty good indication that this is a smart guy, And I think once the season starts, once he has those advanced scouting reports and all the analytics to study, that's how he does his job, and that's going to make him better.
Paul, we saw last year where Kipnis came into the season with an injury or got one soon after, and it kind of bothered him for most of the year. Should fans be worried that they could be seeing this with Michael Brantley?
I think that's a good point, but this is the first day of spring training he came and he had a tight back, and this has lingered. He's coming back to Cleveland, tonight, and he's probably going to get examined. I would think he'd get an MRI tomorrow morning. He's not in the lineup today, but it's a concern. I would think, I remember Francona saying in spring training we're going to give him 5 days off, so we don't have to worry about this in spring training. And here we are, the second day. He misses the second game of the regular season. So I think this is a concern. Right now they say it's nothing structurally wrong. It's just muscular, but it's lingered for a while here.
Hoynes, is there any chance that this becomes a situation where the Indians get proactive about it and decide we're just going to shut this guy down for 15 days, stick him on the DL, and let him rest?
It might be at that point right now. I think they're going to really kind of slow play it here. They've got a lot of off days. But I think if that's what the doctors say, maybe, they do shut him down. But I think, I don't know if they're at that point right now. I think they'll wait a little while longer.
Paul, the other concern I've heard people talk about already, obviously only after 2 games, is this team against left-handed pitching. Do you think we're seeing the basic lineup we're going to see most of the season, or is there room there to come up with an alternate plan?
Well, there is room, but I think they can put Jose Ramirez in that number 2 spot, a right-hander that a switch hitter, and he can break up those 3 lefties at the top of the order. And that's what Francona was worried about all spring. Batting those 3 guys, with Bourne, Brantley, and Kipnis, hitting those 3 guys right at the top. And it wasn't so much against the starter. His concern was them facing kind of a top of the line lefty at the end of the game and having those guys that be at a severe disadvantage. So I think he can break it up with Ramirez in the number 2 spot, but he's looking at it like, those are 3 of my best hitters. I want to have them get as many at bats as possible. So we're going to ride this out for a while. And but you really, I think they're facing David Price and Lobstein against Detroit, 2 lefties, and I don't think that's by accident.
All right, Paul Hoynes, our Indians beat reporter. The Indians and Hoynesy finally coming home tomorrow for the home opener. Of course, the Indians have one more game in this series in Houston. First pitch is at 2 o'clock. Thanks for the time, Hoynesy.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, you got some spinoffs for us?
I do, but first, I've also heard from Indians fans who would like to see Paul Hoynes race Ryan Rayburn to first base because they're just not convinced Rayburn wins after the other night.
I would pay to see that. Can we do that instead of the condiment race?
Yeah, actually,
Hoynes
would not be on board with this.
All right, anyway, thanks, Dan. There were dueling opinions this week regarding the Browns and Johnny Manziel. After Joe Thomas spoke about Manziel having to win back the trust of his teammates, Alex Mack spoke up and suggested that was actually not the case at all, that Manziel already had owned up to his 2014 indiscretions. That prompted a conversation among readers as to which was the right approach, Thomas's or Mack's. And that brings us to our first comment. If one member of a synchronized swim team gets cramps and drowns, do the rest have to drown too or risk getting points taken off? That's a great philosophical question on its own merit, but an even better one since the Browns are, if nothing else, a synchronized sync team. Because uniform colors changes are such a popular topic of conversation in this town as opposed to, say, perfect championship parade routes.
Of course.
Our second commenter took notice of the navy blue the Indians wore in Houston by saying last year's blue unis were too soft, and then said it was just like the team's leadership. Listen, I'm not sure how Chris Antonetti and Mark Shapiro are supposed to exhibit toughness. I just know that that comment came in at 10:18 p.m. And I would have guessed 3:18 a.m. after a night spent on an inflatable swan. With the Indians losing the opener, despite some great work by Corey Kluber, I wondered how soon into the new season it would be before fans started questioning Terry Francona's lineup. Oviskel13 wonders if it's too early to ditch the Rayburn-Murphy platoon, since Rayburn not only didn't hit, but was slow moving on an infield grounder in a rally-killing inning that held great promise for the Tribe. Fake Omar says, your average 45-year-old woman would have beaten that throw to first. Well, maybe, but not in heels. Okay, last. Overall, I'd say if you were, oh, I'm sorry, that's not last. Overall, I'd say if you were prefacing your comment with the words, is it too early, and there are still 161 games to go, you know the answer, Dan knows the answer, I know the answer, the American people know the answer. And finally, a comment on a post by Dan Labbe caught my attention this week. The post dealt with whether the Browns would regret not landing Sam Bradford, which led a reader to wonder if cleveland.com writers were just fishing for a big reader response because it's a feather in their cap when they get one. He wonders if we take bets on who will get the biggest response. Maybe, the reader says, playing us all for fools. I assure you, nothing could be further from the truth.
Thanks for that. Maybe I'll give this back to you. Your next, if your next column gets a few more responses.
There's no chance of that happening.
This is all going to Mary Kay Cabot anyway.
I'll tell you, I do love it in this town when, if the Browns go 1-0, people start thinking that they're going to be great. If the Indians go 0-1, I get flooded with emails about the Dolans not spending enough money, how they didn't find a right-handed power hitter. We need to find that kind of middle ground here where we at least wait until Memorial Day before we blow off the baseball team.
It needs to be some kind of set standard. That's what we need to discuss.
Exactly. There you go.
I got another post on Sam Bradford, maybe.
What is
coming. I don't know. I'll think of something. All right. That'll do it for Sports Insider. My thanks to Joe Vardon, Tom Reed, and Paul Hoynes, and of course, Bud Shaw, co-hosting today, filling in for Chris Fedor. Don't know if he's still on the bus. We need like one of those Fedor trackers. Like
I have a
Google
feeling
does.
whatever he's doing, he's expressing his opinion about something. And the other people have headphones in. Just kidding, Chris.
I hope the person next to him isn't like a Hawks fan or something like that. All right, that'll do it. Join us again next Thursday at noon for another exciting show. I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.